Thank you very much, LJ, and thank you to the World Affairs Council for hosting me. Can everyone hear me? Yes. That's important. So I've been in Charlotte for less than 24 hours, but you guys have certainly earned a reputation for being warm and gracious hosts. I experienced that already firsthand. Everyone has been warm and welcoming, and I'm very grateful for that. So I'll start by talking a little bit about Saudi Arabia and what's happening in the kingdom. But I do want to hear from everybody. I mean, one of the things that I find to be very rewarding about leaving Washington, D.C., and no offense to Washington, D.C., the official channels that we maintain with the White House, with the State Department, with congressional leaders are key to maintaining the relationship. But for me personally, going out and visiting with people, traveling across the United States is probably one of the most rewarding parts of what I do. So let me start by saying that Saudi Arabia is currently undergoing what I would argue is the most consequential transformation in the world. And I don't use the word consequential lightly. I say so because of where Saudi Arabia sits in the international community. So as I'm sure most of you know, Saudi Arabia is the birthplace of Islam and the location of its two holiest sites in Mecca and Medina. And because of that, Muslim majority countries look to Saudi Arabia to play a leadership role in addressing some of the challenges that the broader Muslim community around the world faces. At the same time, Saudi Arabia is also the Arab world's biggest economy. And because of that, Arab majority countries look to Saudi Arabia to play a leadership role in terms of addressing some of the challenges that the Middle East faces. One does not have to be a historian of the Middle East to know that it has unfortunately faced more than its fair number of challenges. All one has to do is turn on the news, and the Middle East is usually in the headlines and usually not in a good way, unfortunately. And on a third front, Saudi Arabia has also, I think there's an expectation globally among both oil-producing countries as well as oil-consuming countries for Saudi Arabia to play a leadership role in making sure that international energy markets are adequately supplied and stable. We have been doing this for decades through our membership of OPEC, and more recently as members of OPEC+. So we've essentially embraced these expectations from our neighbors and from the broader international community, and we do realize that the policies that we implement inside Saudi Arabia, because of the reasons that I just mentioned, do have far-reaching repercussions. So the transformation that I mentioned at the outset is something we call Vision 2030. And Vision 2030 was unveiled by His Royal Highness the Crown Prince back in 2016. Broadly speaking, the broad objectives of the vision is the empowerment of every segment of Saudi society, the development of every sector of the Saudi economy, but we've also completely revolutionized the way that we deliver government services. So more specifically, the vision is seeking to diversify our economy so that we're not as reliable as we have been in previous years on oil revenues. We have a number of sectors that are at the center of this transformation. One of them is our mining sector. Now, last year we conducted what was probably the most comprehensive geological survey in Saudi Arabia, and it found that we have $2.4 trillion worth of metals and minerals that could be developed and exported, and that obviously with the potential of generating billions of dollars to our economy, but also generating thousands of jobs to Saudis in the kingdom. At the same time, Saudi Arabia in many ways is also strategically located. I wish I had a map behind me, but I'm sure some of you have seen where Saudi Arabia sits geographically. We're basically at the cross section of three continents, Asia, Africa, and Europe. We are on two major waterways, the Red Sea and what we call the Arabian Sea. I know some people call it the Persian Sea, but it's a whole tomato thing. And because of that, we believe that we can play a role as a logistics hub, as a connector that connects the global north to the global south. So we're investing heavily in developing our seaports, in developing our airports. We are developing a new airline. We're also developing our information networks to make sure that we can help promote the transfer of goods and services and information between the global north and the global south. At the same time, we have transformed Saudi Arabia into a global tourism destination. And I know some of you are kind of looking at me funny when I say that, but Saudi Arabia actually has the second fastest growing tourism sector in the world. We believe that we offer tourists a unique experience. We have 8 UNESCO World Heritage Sites, the most famous of which is the Nabatean capital of Al-Ula, which is in the northwest of Saudi Arabia. I have been to it myself a few times, and it is basically 111 tombs that have been carved into the mountains and into the rock. I've been inside a couple of these tombs. I didn't stick around too much because they're tombs at the end of the day, but this has been at the core of our drive to become a tourism destination. Last year, we had over 100 million visits. Now, I can break that down, but basically 22 million people came to Saudi Arabia for non-religious tourism purposes. That figure is only going to increase. I was in Al-Ula, I was in Saudi not long ago, a couple of months ago, and we're beginning to see literally busloads of tourists in Al-Ula and in Riyadh. I mean, I see tourists all over Riyadh, the capital, and I know they're tourists because they're dressed in jeans and sneakers, and they have their backpacks, and in their defense, that's how I dress, and I have a backpack right there to prove that that's the universal uniform. At the same time, we have some pretty interesting, unique projects that are kind of on the cutting edge of science and technology. Maybe one of the most famous of which is something we call NEOM. And NEOM is essentially a smart city that we are building from the ground up. It is in northwest of Saudi Arabia. It is the size of Belgium, or for the Americans in the room, Massachusetts. I hope those two territories are identical in size, otherwise I have some explaining to do. It will be powered exclusively by renewable energy. It will have different sectors. It will have a tech sector, a business sector, a wellness sector. It will also have the world's biggest green hydrogen plant that is currently under construction as we speak. It will be a tourism destination, and in fact, the first tourist resort opened its doors last year. And not only that, but the topography of NEOM is so different than the rest of Saudi Arabia, so different that we're actually going to host the Asian Winter Olympics in 2029. And I said winter correctly, because NEOM is just, the climate is very much different than it is in the rest of Saudi Arabia. I think people have the perception that Saudi Arabia is hot everywhere year round. I think that's probably true in my hometown of Jeddah, but it's certainly not true around the rest of the kingdom. So in many ways, Vision 2030 is a uniquely Saudi project. But for it to succeed, we do want, and we're working towards, promoting stability, prosperity in the region more broadly. So, and here I obviously, given what the World Affairs Council focuses on, I obviously do want to mention how we formulate our foreign policy. Our foreign policy in many ways is meant to complement Vision 2030. So we adhere very strictly to a set of principles in the way that we conduct our foreign policy that have allowed us to maintain good, if not excellent, relations with countries all over the world. So some of these principles are, we resort to the use of force only as a means of last resort. We are strong and firm believers in the importance of diplomacy, including, quiet behind-the-scenes diplomacy. We support collective efforts, especially those that are sanctioned by multilateral cooperation and multilateral organizations, especially the United Nations. We support internationally recognized state institutions, and we do not support any militant non-state actors, regardless of their political leanings. So we support these principles in Yemen, we support them in Iraq, we support them in Syria, we support them in Libya. I think you see where I'm going with this. And because of that, we are often uniquely positioned to play the role of honest broker. So Saudi Arabia, I think, has a pretty good record of mediating, not just between countries, but even between warring factions within countries. So our record goes back to 1990, when we helped end what was then a 15-year civil war in Lebanon. And in fact, the agreement that ended that war is called the Taif Agreement, which is the town that it was reached in Saudi Arabia. More recently, we helped broker an agreement between Eritrea and Ethiopia. And even more recently, we offered to mediate between Russia and Ukraine. Obviously, that war continues to rage. But the reason that we have been able to maintain that open channel with both the leaderships in Ukraine and Russia is because, again, like I said, we are strong believers in quiet diplomacy. We shy away from naming and shaming, and we often believe that it is counterproductive. So we continue that channel. We've made some inroads. We've been able to successfully mediate in releasing some Ukrainian and Russian detainees over the years. We've also helped release some American detainees who were in Russia. And that's due to the fact that we maintain this channel of dialogue. So that's on the foreign policy front. Last but certainly not least, and just given where we are, obviously I'd love to say a couple of words about Saudi-U.S. relations. Saudi-U.S. relations are long-standing. They go back 80 years. Not only have they endured for 80 years, but they've actually continued to grow and to deepen and to strengthen under both Democratic and Republican administrations. The relationship in many ways is multidimensional. So it includes regular political cooperation on a number of fronts. It includes regular military joint training between our two forces. Not only that, but I think people sometimes forget, but Saudi Arabia and the United States have fought not one, but two wars side by side. The first was back in 1990 when we helped expel the forces of Saddam Hussein from Kuwait. And more recently, again, we fought side by side to expel the terrorist group ISIS from Iraq and Syria. At the same time, there's a very important economic component to the relationship. A company like Bechtel has been in Saudi Arabia for 80 years. Other companies like Pepsi, GM, GE, Boeing have been in the kingdom for decades. And now the new giants, Apple, Amazon, Oracle, they're all there. They're all doing business in Saudi Arabia and helping us move this very exciting stage in our development forward. There's also an important people-to-people dimension to the relationship. And unfortunately, that does get overlooked. So as we speak, there's an estimated 70 to 80,000 Americans living and working in Saudi Arabia. Some of them have been working there for years. Frankly, many of them have lived in the kingdom longer than I have. And for sure, many of them have seen more of Saudi Arabia than I have. But in my defense, I've probably seen more of the United States than most Americans. So it kind of evens out that way. And I always like to talk about the people-to-people dimension because, just as an example, there's an estimated 20,000 Saudi students studying in the United States currently. About 10 years ago, we had close to 90,000 students. And these students, obviously, they're all here to attain a formal education. That's the primary goal of why they're here. But while they're in the United States, they've many of them have taken time from whatever free time that they do have to give back to their local communities. They're volunteering at hospitals, at schools, at retirement communities. I know of at least 3 or 4 student-run organizations, Saudi student-run organizations, that have actually helped American communities recover from natural disaster. There's video of some of these organizations working in Houston after Hurricane Harvey a few years ago. We're again literally working side by side with Americans who are complete strangers to them. But I think that really speaks and underscores the fact that, contrary to the popular perception that Saudi Arabia and the United States share common interests, but no common values, I take issue with that. I've lived in the United States for a very long time. I engage with the student community here. I talk to Americans who are living and working in Saudi Arabia all the time. I know that this relationship would not have been able to endure and to grow for as long as it has, just based on shared interests. And again, the fact that hundreds of Saudi students took it upon themselves to help Americans recover from a natural disaster says something. The fact that many Americans volunteer their time and their free time in Saudi Arabia to teach Saudis English, again, completely voluntarily, says something. This relationship, I think, has been good for both countries. Multiple successive U.S. administrations have publicly said that it's helped advance the national security interests of the United States. Certainly it has for Saudi Arabia as well. I think that's been good for Saudi Arabia. I think it's been good for the United States. I'll go a step further and say that it's been good for the Middle East and for the broader international community. So with that, again, thank you so much for your gracious hospitality. And I'd be more than happy to take any questions that you might have about Saudi Arabia. Or if you want to hear my expectations for the New York Jets, I'd be more than happy to discuss that as well.
Thank you, Fahad, very much for leading into what I hope will be an active Q&A. Reema Wellman, a board member of the Home Affairs Council and a former traveler to the Middle East, actively in my Citibank days, where Saudi Arabia was a place I was not allowed to go. Fast forward, I had my clients from Saudi Arabia in New York. Fast forward, my conversation with Fahad and reading Vision 2030 and all of the key components. I am floored with the level of progress that has been made in so many different areas. So what I would like to do, I get to ask the first question. And I will be lobbying it. I want to make sure our students are ready for questions. I see one here, just wait, I'll acknowledge you first. And make it a question. Keep it short. We want to make sure we are able to engage as many people with questions as possible. So I wanted to ask the question, as a female, the changes that have taken place with this 2016, whether it's driver's licenses, home ownership, business ownership, it's been stunning. So please feel free to touch on the very positive components of that.
Sure.
But if you could also talk about places such as violence against women, gender pay gap, areas that are frankly something that we see everywhere around the world. But where do you see the gaps and what's being looked at in terms of the culture of the people in the country and how that's been absorbed?
Great, thank you for that question. And I'm sorry to hear that you weren't able to visit the kingdom.
Tourism, I'm coming.
But we've made it very easy. So for Americans, you can apply for a tourist visa online. I'm told it takes all of 5 minutes. I haven't applied to it myself. But to make it even easier, you can actually get a visa on arrival, which is, I think, the easiest way to visit the kingdom. So if you have an opportunity, please go visit. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. Now, when it comes to the empowerment of women, I think that we've made tremendous strides towards the empowerment of women with the unveiling of Vision 2030. So the empowerment of women is not only a goal of 2030, but it's also a key to its success. After all, the majority of our population is women, I think 52%. The majority of college students are women. So we have made sure that women have every chance to succeed, not just professionally, but also personally. So as we speak, I really cannot think of a single sector of the economy where women are not only engaged and included, but actually succeeding and competing with their male counterparts. So maybe we can start. We can start with my own boss in Washington, D.C., Her Royal Highness Princess Reema in Bandar, Saud. So she was the first female ambassador appointed back in 2019. But we've appointed, I think, 5 or 6 female ambassadors since then. We have female business leaders. We have female academics who are leading entire departments across universities in Saudi Arabia. We have women in the security services, in the armed services. We have women athletes of every kind, not just soccer players, but we have race car drivers. We have women firefighters. We had the first Saudi female astronaut went to the International Space Station last year. So I think we've come a long way towards narrowing the gender gap. We probably need to do a little bit more work, but I think we're certainly on the right track. Her Highness would have loved to come here, and she does travel across the United States. And she is, technically I'm the spokesperson, and maybe I do an okay job of these speaking engagements, I'm not sure. I'm working on it. But she is a dynamic, gifted public speaker, and she speaks very, very eloquently, especially about the empowerment of women. And she speaks about it from a very personal perspective, talking in detail about some of her own challenges when she works at the Sports Commission a few years ago, and some of frankly, the restrictions that she faced. But we've made a decision. This decision came from the top down, from His Majesty the King and His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. But this has very broad support across Saudi society, because the limitations that we had on women, especially the inability to drive in the past, that was more than just, it was made us unique, but not in a good way. But it had it added financial burdens on every household. And, I remember my mother and daughter who had to reach out to me or my father to go anywhere. Or the other alternative was to have a driver, and obviously that constituted a financial burden. So those days are long over. Our leadership made a decision in 2017 that women are going to be allowed to drive. We made an announcement about 6 months before that actual date. The date came, women started driving, and we haven't looked back. And so now whenever I go to Saudi, I see women engaged. I mean, this is visible to me. This is not just a question of statistics. I see it every time I go. I mean, you see it at the airport. For those of you who have been to the kingdom, a lot of the staff, the immigration officers are mostly women now. But you go to hotels, you go to government agencies, you go to the private sector, you're going to see women everywhere. And young women, as well as young men. After all, and that's a reflection of the demographic reality in Saudi Arabia. We have a predominantly young population. Some 70% is under the age of 35, which leaves me out of it, and it's a bitter pill to swallow, but that's fine. So I think, like I said in my remarks, I think Saudi Arabia is really undergoing a remarkable transformation for the better, certainly as far as I'm concerned. We still have work to do, but our American friends have been there from the get-go. Not just government relations and official relations and military cooperation, but American businesses, like I said, have been there for decades. And so they're there now, and they're helping us move things along. And I hear from Americans who, again, have been living in the kingdom for a while, and they're also, struck by the pace of change, and they say, keep it going. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. I did see a first hand here. You still have your question?
Yeah. It's another
And
question.
use the mic, please.
But is it, I would encourage everybody to go and see this beautiful country. I worked there for the University of New Haven in 12 and 13, 2012, and I was wearing, the black, everything, and I couldn't drive, I couldn't be on a taxi without a man. But and then I went back just before COVID, and I saw a beautiful transformation, really amazing, and women dressed like I was, not with the stomach out, kind of modern, but beautiful clothes and happy going to movies and so on. And I was really, really impressed. Also, I had my visa at the port of entry. I did not have it before. When I worked there, I had to have lots of paperwork. I had to do lots of paperwork to be there, but not anymore. And if you have a chance, go to Jeddah, my favorite city, and go to the desert and spend a night or two in the desert. Beautiful.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your kind words.
I
I
would
really
like to
appreciate
know
it.
that we have an ambassador on behalf of tourism in Saudi Arabia in our midst. Other questions? Yes, please.
What ambitions does Saudi Arabia have to help the Palestinian community recover from the war that's been going on?
Thank you very much. So I think Saudi Arabia's policy on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been clear and consistent for many years. We have long argued that for the broader Middle East to enjoy any semblance of peace and prosperity and stability, this conflict has to be resolved. Not only has it brought, frankly, a lot of pain and suffering to both peoples, Palestinians for sure, but also Israelis, but it's also been exploited by the most radical militant elements in the Middle East and elsewhere. I'm thinking primarily of ISIS and Al-Qaeda and other organizations. So going back to 2002, the late King Abdullah presented, this was at the Arab League's summit in Beirut, Lebanon. He presented what is now known as the Arab Peace Initiative. And the initiative basically offers Israel for normalization, not just with Saudi Arabia, but all 21 members of the League of Arab States in return for a full and comprehensive recognition and peace with the Palestinians based on the 67 border. That offer is still on the table, but obviously you don't have to be a historian of the region to know that we are not anywhere near that goal. What is happening in Gaza is frankly heartbreaking. I think you've all seen the footage. You've all seen the figures. Last, if I recall correctly, 60,000 people have died. 66% of all structures have been destroyed, including schools and hospitals. That is not the way forward. And two-state solution is, I think, the most sensible solution. And it's a simple formula at the end of the day. I don't think it's that complicated. It is essentially, it offers dignity to Palestinians in return for security for Israelis. I think it's a good plan. It's a sensible plan because this is not sustainable. I'm not going to speak on behalf of Israelis, but I don't think Israelis want to live life this way, where they're constantly worried about their security. And I know for a fact Palestinians don't want to live the way they've been living. I know a lot of Palestinians, some of whom had to leave in '67 and after. Many Palestinians have been living as refugees their entire lives. Sometimes I do a lot of speaking engagements, and periodically I hear the suggestion that, why don't Palestinians go to other countries? I think it comes from a good place, but to be honest, it always gives me pause, because I'm pretty sure that's not what Palestinians want. And I hear it from them all the time. They just want to return home. They're not really asking for much. And so we're going to continue to promote that idea. Saudi Arabia is working closely with France at the United Nations to advance a two-state solution. And we're going to have a conference in the next couple of weeks with concrete measures as to how that can become a reality. So I think the international community has a role to play here. And the more countries recognize Palestine, I think the more progress we make. We also are chairing a global alliance with Sweden. We're essentially the same thing, to promote and to encourage other countries to recognize Palestine as a state. So that's where we stand. We've provided Palestinians with billions in addition to the political assistance, to economic assistance over the years. I don't have the exact figures, but even today as we speak, we've sent dozens of ships and planes and buses to try to get humanitarian assistance to people in need. I mean, in this day and age, where you have couple of thousand billionaires around the world, to be honest, and this is just my personal opinion, it's just an odd, unsettling thought to think that there's people, and I've seen the footage, especially of kids in Palestine, who are literally having to sift through rubble and dirt looking for remnants of wheat to take home and to make a loaf of bread. I don't think that's right. So we'll continue to work on it, but obviously we have some work to do. We will continue to work with the United States, who is one of our strongest partners. But I think the broader international community, the United Nations system itself, has some obligations. That's why it's there, to make sure that disputes like this get resolved. We don't really see another way, another path other than a political resolution. My apologies, I realize that was a long answer, but it's a long conflict.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd love to turn to our student tables and ask for a question. I saw right up there, you could just state your name and your school, and your mic is coming.
I'm James Lewis. I'm a senior at Hickory Ridge High School. And my question is, growing up, I've heard about how oil-rich Saudi Arabia is. I just wanted to know, is Saudi Arabia still relying on oil as the main source of financial income for the country, or is it something different?
Great. So that's a great question. And the short answer is no. And frankly, that's kind of the main purpose of Vision 2030. Oil will remain an important part of our economy for the simple reason that there is still robust global demand for oil. Does anyone in this room know what the global demand on a daily basis for oil is in terms of barrels? Take a guess. It's not. You're not going to be graded on this question. You can just throw out a number. It's close. It's 100 million barrels. So that demand is not going anywhere. So we're going to continue to do our part. At the same time, we as a population, our population was all of 5 million in 1970. As of last year, it crossed 35 million. So that's a six-fold increase. So we cannot afford to rely on oil. That is a commodity over which we don't really have control over the price of oil. So that's really the main purpose of Vision 2030. So that's why we're focusing on our mining sector, on our tech sector, on our tourism sector. That's why we're transforming Saudi Arabia into a logistics hub. And not only that, but we're actually investing heavily into renewable energy. And sometimes, again, when I say that, people are a little surprised. But Saudi Arabia gets more than its fair share of sun and wind. And yes. And so we are developing those two sources as we speak. And in fact, one of our goals for Vision 2030 is to have 50% of our electricity needs coming from renewable energy. We're also producing green and blue hydrogen, which is another source of clean energy. We're even working with the United States on developing a nuclear energy for various reasons. So, you know, we take the threat of climate change seriously, and we unleashed or unveiled something we call Saudi, the Green Initiative. Sorry, blanked that for a second. That was unveiled in 2019, and it's basically a series of initiatives that address and come up with ways to mitigate the impact of climate change. So on one hand, we are trying to reduce and remove carbon emissions. We've adopted something we call the circular carbon economy. And it has 4 R's, and I always forget one of them, but it's basically reduce, remove, reuse, and recycle. Thank you, because I was not going to remember that. I've spoken about this initiative maybe 100 times. I cannot get the 4th one. But it's not always this recycle. It's one of they're interchangeable. But so that's on one hand. On the other hand, we are trying to make sure that our hydrocarbons, our oil is as clean as possible, because like I said, that demand, the global demand is still there. And so we'll continue to walk on 2 different paths, but we believe that they're complementary. We can produce clean hydrocarbons while reducing our emissions and making sure that we're also increasing our energy mix to make sure that it's as diversified as possible.
Excellent. Would love. Okay, I see another one in the back there. Red dress.
In your introduction, you talked about being a member of OPEC and OPEC Plus.
Anyway, I'm Meg Kaufman, and I don't know what OPEC Plus is. Could you just tell me?
Right, so OPEC Plus is a slightly bigger group that does include Russia, Mexico, and a number of other oil-producing countries. I think Russia is the main one, and Russia is an important player in that space. And like I said, I think Saudi Arabia views itself as a responsible steward of global energy, because we are among the biggest producers of crude in the world. We're the biggest exporter. We believe that we have a responsibility, I think, along with some of our OPEC and OPEC Plus partners, in making sure that oil production and markets are adequately supplied and that they're stable. And so we did do this with OPEC for decades. Now we're doing it with OPEC Plus. So we take into account not just the interests of oil producers, but also oil consumers, because we know that, if you don't have adequate supplies, if the price is really high or really low for that matter, that it creates instability. So we take all of that into account, because we're taking the long view, and we want to make sure that oil markets are stable for the long term, because oil is going to be with us for a while. It is still the primary fuel around the world, certainly for transportation and other sectors. So we're going to continue to meet that responsibility, but again, doing it in the most responsible way possible in terms of being mindful of climate change and the impact on the environment, for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions? Right there. You just state your name and.
My name is Qais. I am a freshman at CPCC, Central Piedmont Community College.
Okay.
I am a Jordanian citizen and I just moved to the US about a year ago. I think this context is important to give you an idea of why I'm asking this question.
Sure.
So Saudi Arabia is making great strides, as you mentioned in your introduction, in many industries and is trying to appeal to the international community by erasing some of the misconceptions that have been had about the kingdom. Are the institutional advancements in Saudi Arabia retroactive to the Arab identity? Where is the line drawn for the sake of the cultural preservation of the kingdom and the Arab region as a whole?
All right. Thank you. That's a great question. So as I mentioned, a project like NEOM is obviously very forward, future leaning. At the same time, with Vision 2030, we also have a newfound appreciation for who we are as a people. We have a newfound appreciation for our history, for our culture. You know, as I don't know if I mentioned this at the outset, but my late father was a career diplomat, so I traveled quite a bit, and it's been a pleasure, and I've been fortunate to travel. And as far as I can tell, I'm not aware of a single people anywhere on earth who are not proud of their history and their heritage. I think that is not an exception in Saudi Arabia. So some elements of Vision 2030 are exactly that. We are preserving a number of historic sites, one of which is right outside of Riyadh. It's a town called Diriyah, and it's the ancestral home, or rather the first capital of the first Saudi state all the way back in 1722. That's a major undertaking now. But we have other projects all across Saudi Arabia, again, with the idea that we really, I think, underscores that we are proud of our history, and we're proud of who we are. In terms of religion, religion still plays a very important part in our daily lives. We are certainly blessed to be the custodians and the location of Mecca and Medina. People may not realize, but Saudi Arabia has spared no expense or effort to make the holy sites as accessible as possible. So there's pictures of the Holy Mosque in Mecca from 100 years ago. And if you compare it to what it looks like today, it looks very different. Year in, year out, we accommodate 2 million people just for Hajj alone. And for those of you who are not familiar with Hajj, it's a tenet of Islam, and it takes place during a specific time of the year. It takes place over 3 to 4 days, depending on how you do it. But we host 2 million people from all around the world, speaking dozens of languages. And not only are they there, but they are moving back and forth to the different sites around Mecca. So we've built, over the years, we've built tunnels, we've built bridges, the tents that we have are fire resistant, the marble deflects the sun. We've really left no stone unturned to make sure that Mecca and Medina are as accessible and as safe as possible. We have thousands of regular Saudi men and women who are volunteering, speaking dozens of languages. We have security personnel. We have hundreds of medical personnel, some of whom perform very complicated surgeries, including open heart surgery, just to name a few. And this is what happens. You have 2 million people in one space over the course of 4 or 5 days. You're going to have medical emergencies. So that's on one front. But we as Saudis, like I said, and I do get that question a fair amount. So obviously a lot has changed in Saudi Arabia. But the two things that really haven't changed are our values and our faith. I think we as a people, I think we're very proud of our faith. We're proud of our heritage. We're proud of our history. And various aspects of Vision 2030 are highlighting that. Like I said, by preserving sites, and by a lot of we're holding all sorts of events to introduce people to Saudi culture. And I mentioned Saudi students earlier, but one of the things that they also do when they come to the United States is they form Saudi clubs at various universities. And so it's interesting. They basically take it upon themselves they become unofficial Saudi ambassadors while they're here. So they invite their American peers and colleagues and classmates to share a meal, to tell them a little about Saudi Arabia and what's happening there. What's interesting, though, is when they come back to Saudi Arabia, they become your biggest advocates. So some of them maybe unwittingly become, big proponents of the United States. They maintain these relationships with their American peers and friends, sometimes for decades. My late father came and went to school in Whittier College in California. Does anyone know which president went to Whittier? Okay, very nice. And my father stayed in touch with his host family for decades afterwards. And there's thousands and thousands of these examples. So yeah, I think it's a bit of a delicate balancing act for us, but we are never going to forget who we are as a people. And I think we're intensely proud of our heritage and certainly our faith as well. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Let's see, far back there in the middle. Keep going to your left.
Hi, I'm Liam Romance from Charlotte Country Day. I just wanted to know how the construction for Vision 2030 has affected the people living in Neom, specifically that area. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question. So Neom, as we speak, has 100,000 people working on it, if you count the laborers as well. But it has a staff of, I think, 5,000 people. It has its own hospital. It has its own school. There's a university that is being built. And like I said, it's going to have different sectors, a tech sector, an educational sector, an entertainment sector, a manufacturing hub that is right on the water. I haven't been to Neom myself, but I have spoken to some of the leaders there. And I don't know if I said this at the outset in my remarks, so my apologies if I have, but I heard the leadership describe Neom this way. They said that in Neom, we're going to try to demonstrate that human beings can live in complete harmony with nature by employing the most advanced technologies available, which I think is a very cool concept. And so I've met with the leadership there a number of times. They're very passionate about it. It's real. The tourism part of it is they've already opened their doors. I know more than a handful of Americans live and work in Neom. They're firm believers too. And it's basically meant to be an incubator of talented people from all over the world. So if you're an engineer, there's a place for you. There's a place for you in Neom. If you are a researcher, there's a place for you there. I think it's a very unique project. And once all is said and done, I think it's going to be kind of a game-changing endeavor in terms of just urban living, certainly in the Middle East for sure. Thank you for your question, though.
We have time for one more question, and I see a hand raised in the back there, waiting to speak.
Hello, I'm Ann Wilson, and I am with Central Piedmont Community College. My question is pertaining to, is Saudi Arabia open to American citizens and students becoming interns there to understand what you're doing, better understand what you're doing, and learn firsthand? And if so, also, what about business and how welcoming? I understand that Saudi Arabia is very diverse, and we have different Americans there. But how welcoming are the Saudis of African Americans?
Thank you. That's a great question. So as we speak, there's 1,300 American companies doing business in Saudi Arabia. Like I said, some of them have been there for decades, and that list is only going to grow. There's 70 to 80,000 Americans living and working in the kingdom as we speak. I know that people in the South and in Charlotte take pride in being warm and gracious hosts, but we take hospitality very seriously in Saudi Arabia as well. For those of you who have been to Saudi Arabia, I think it comes from a good place. But for those of you who are planning on visiting, I do have to warn you that the tea and coffee just keeps coming. And we serve something called Saudi coffee, and we serve it in a small cup. And it's not a very dark color, and the consistency is light, but it packs a punch caffeine-wise. So when I've traveled with Americans, they'll have 2 or 3, and then I'll ask them the next day, did you sleep? And they go, no, I didn't, and I'm not sure why. I mean, and I tried to sleep after my 4th cup of Saudi coffee, and it didn't. And I said, yeah, you might want to, pull back a little bit because that coffee is caffeinated. But all kidding aside, I think we've long welcomed people from all over the world in Saudi Arabia. Last year, we conducted our most comprehensive census. And it found, like I said earlier, our total population is 35 million, 34 and change. But 14 million of whom are non-Saudis. Now, they come from all walks of life, all traditions, all backgrounds, all races. And again, I certainly like to, and I believe that's the case, that we are welcoming welcoming to people from all backgrounds, because it's ingrained into our culture. Like I said, hospitality. If you come to Saudi Arabia, and you're going to see this, if you go on YouTube or social media, you're going to see dozens and dozens of videos of tourists, including Americans, who are traveling across Saudi Arabia. Frankly, you've probably seen more of Saudi Arabia than I have. And complete strangers will come out to them, Saudis. They know they're not local, and they insist that they share a meal or a cup of coffee or tea. And these people are, again, very gracious for posting these videos. I think it shows that we are welcoming of people. You asked about African Americans specifically, and I believe that we are welcoming, again, of people from all faiths, all backgrounds, ethnic or otherwise, because it's also kind of a core tenet of our faith. In my understanding of Islam, God judges people not based on their race, but on the intensity of their faith and in the way that they help their fellow mankind. So that's not race-based. And if you go to the Grand Mosque, you're going to see people from literally all walks of life. They all wear the same garment, which is essentially a white towel. And that's the reason that people see videos of people performing Hajj and wonder what that's about. And that is to remove any semblance or manifestations of earthly wealth. When you are in that spot, it is not your wealth, it is not your race, it is not your color, it's who you are as a person and your faith and the good that you bring to this planet.
You'll all agree it's unique to have someone who knows our country and is owned so well and can provide that bridge. I want to thank this group for excellent questions. Those of you who are veterans of these lunches know that the question and answer is a really important component. And thank you, Fahad, for being so generous with your time and responding.
Thank you.